Today I want to talk about muscle aging and about a simple, accessible way that may help slow it down. And this topic matters not just because muscles look worse with age and become visibly weaker. The truth is, muscle aging starts much earlier, long before any obvious external signs appear. Why is this so important? Because muscles are not just about appearance. First and foremost, they determine your ability to move, stay independent, and take care of yourself later in life. Strong muscles protect you from falls. And in older age, a fall often becomes the beginning of a serious chain of events. Fractures, long periods of immobility, muscle loss, slower recovery, loss of independence, and a major decline in quality of life. Sometimes, unfortunately, it leads to very severe outcomes. But that's not all. If your muscles are weak, you can't train properly, you can't maintain a healthy metabolic rate, and you become more resistant to insulin. Insulin sensitivity drops. Blood pressure becomes harder to regulate. Physical performance declines, VO2 max, and overall endurance also suffer. In other words, almost everything in the body is affected. I'll be honest, I used to underestimate this myself, but over time, I've become increasingly convinced how critical muscle health really is. It's another reminder that everything in the body is deeply interconnected. To understand muscle aging better, let's not start with elderly people, but with a place where even small changes become immediately obvious: professional sports. In sports, you can clearly see what happens when muscles start to lose function. Everything comes down to fractions of a second. Coordination, reaction speed, the ability to generate force instantly, to absorb impact, to jump, sprint, lift, or strike with maximum power. Boxing, tennis, hockey, soccer, weightlifting, all explosive and high-performance sports. And it's no coincidence that peak performance in these sports usually falls within a relatively narrow age window. After 30, it becomes noticeably harder to stay at the top. Yes, there are many reasons: injuries, recovery time, competition. But one major factor is that muscles simply don't produce force as quickly and efficiently as they used to. A person may still be strong, but generating that strength rapidly becomes harder. And here's something important. Muscle aging is not uniform. Early on, it's the speed and power characteristics that decline first, what we often call explosive strength, the ability to produce high force in a very short amount of time. That's why endurance athletes often maintain a high level longer than athletes who rely on explosive power. We see this not only in elite sports. Even among older adults, you'll sometimes see people who can still run long distances quite well. But in sprinting, jumping, or explosive movements, age shows up much more clearly. You can even test this yourself. Try measuring how far you can jump from a standstill or how high you can jump vertically. Then repeat the test a year or two later. It's a surprisingly clear indicator of how your explosive capacity changes over time. And this isn't just about sports. It's about fall risk, injuries, and loss of independence. I personally know cases where an elderly person is fully aware and mentally intact, but physically so weak that they need help with basic tasks like standing up, eating, or getting dressed. And I think very few people would want that kind of aging trajectory. So in this video, I don't just want to explain what muscle aging looks like. I also want to discuss a potentially interesting and accessible option that may help slow it down. That option is quercetin. But before we get there, we need to understand the mechanism first. One of the key issues in muscle aging is the decline in fast-twitch muscle fibers. When those fibers don't function properly, you can't fully engage the muscle. And without sufficient activation, training adaptation becomes weaker. But any workout is essentially an adaptation process. The better the stimulus you can produce, the stronger the adaptation response. If the muscle can't fully activate, the training effect is reduced. This applies not only to strength sports, but also to martial arts, team sports, and even endurance training, because high-level endurance still depends on high-intensity efforts and interval capacity, where fast fibers play a major role. Now let's break down why this happens. Muscles are made up of many fibers controlled by motor neurons in the spinal cord. These neurons form what are called motor units, the basic functional units of muscle activation. When demand is low, the body recruits small, efficient motor units. As demand increases, larger and stronger units are added. And when maximum force is needed, the body recruits high-threshold motor units. These are the units responsible for explosive actions: jumping, sprinting, reacting quickly, or preventing a fall. And unfortunately, these high-threshold motor units are the first to decline with age. Some motor neurons stop functioning properly. Some muscle fibers lose their nerve supply. Some are taken over by neighboring neurons, while others simply disappear over time. The result is a restructuring of the muscle. On the surface, muscle size may not change dramatically, but its quality of function declines significantly. A person can still look relatively strong, but explosive strength and speed are noticeably reduced. And that's exactly what matters most in real life, for balance, reaction, and fall prevention. Now the question becomes, can we improve the recruitment of these high-threshold motor units? Can we partially restore some of that lost power and speed? This is where quercetin becomes interesting. Quercetin is a plant flavonoid found in foods like onions, apples, grapes, and berries. In a typical diet, intake is relatively modest, usually tens of milligrams per day. Researchers have looked at what happens when higher doses are given. In one double-blind, placebo-controlled study, elderly participants around 70 years old took 200 milligrams of quercetin daily for 6 weeks while performing resistance training 3 times per week. The results were interesting. The placebo group improved strength by about 5%, while the quercetin group improved by about 15%. That's roughly a 3-fold difference in progress over the same training period. Even more interesting, muscle mass did not significantly increase. The improvement was mainly in strength. And one possible explanation is improved recruitment of high-threshold motor units, meaning the muscle was able to access more of its existing strength potential. Personally, I find this very intriguing. That's why I decided to try quercetin myself at a dose of around 200 milligrams per day. And to be completely honest, I did notice some improvements in strength and interval performance, but I also recognize that part of that may be subjective. I'm not making any medical claims or giving universal recommendations, just sharing something I found interesting and potentially promising. There's also another study suggesting quercetin may improve muscle elasticity, which could be relevant for mobility and injury prevention. Of course, quercetin is not a solution on its own. Everything still depends on the basics: training, proper loading, adequate protein intake, good circulation, and overall lifestyle. No supplement can replace that foundation. And finally, I already know what some people will say: muscles don't age. I'm 50 and in better shape than I was at 30. But that doesn't prove muscles don't age. It only shows that you are more trained at 50 than you were at 30. That's not a comparison of aging biology. That's a comparison of training status. If someone trained consistently and optimally from childhood, strength would still gradually change with age-related biological shifts in the neuromuscular system. So it's important to separate two things: training adaptation and biological aging. You can absolutely become stronger at 50 than you were at 30 if you trained poorly before. But that doesn't mean aging isn't happening in the neuromuscular system. And in closing, I want to say this: human health is not just about strength. It's about maintaining quality of life and slowing the aging process as much as possible. And according to some estimates, people can lose up to 15 years of healthy life due to poor long-term habits. A lot of it really comes down to the choices we make. Thanks for watching, and take care of your health.